Well, Matinva agus Fáilte. Good morning and welcome. Welcome to all the board members and to those members of the public and the press who are accessing the meeting virtually today. This is the first time we've used this particular form of virtual meeting, and I would ask Ruth, the board secretary, just to say a little bit about how we proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, during the COVID situation, we're changing our board meeting arrangements. So all of our board meetings are being held through Microsoft Teams, and we're offering the public access to these meetings through Microsoft Teams as well. So this means we will no longer be using our original webcast arrangements. So we have members of the press in attendance at the meeting today who will be here as observers, and we've asked the members of the press not to have their camera on and to remain muted throughout the meeting. We are recording the meeting so that once the meeting is complete, we will upload the recording to our web, so it will be available for anybody to view thereafter, just as we would previously have done with our webcast. Obviously, there's a meeting etiquette whereby if any of the board members want to speak, you use the raise your hand function, and we don't rely on the chat function for today's meeting. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ruth. And just a reminder again to use the show hands function when you want to speak. And I'd like to begin by welcoming our three new non-execs to the board, to their first board meeting. They were with us yesterday for a development session, but they join us today for their first full NHS Highland board meeting. They are Graham Bell, Jerry O'Brien and Susan Ringwood, and you're all very welcome indeed. And I would also like this stage to congratulate Joanna MacDonald, our Chief Officer in Argyll, who has been appointed to the post of Deputy Chief Social Worker for Scotland by the Scottish Government. So many congratulations to Joanna, who'll be with us for a little while yet, and we value your time with us immensely, Joanna, and we'll find a way to say thank you before you leave. Are there any apologies, Ruth?
Thank you. No, I've not received any formal apologies. I've been advised that Philip McRae might be a little late for the meeting. Otherwise, that's all there is.
Just to say that I'm here already. Thank you very much, Ruth.
Excellent. Thank you, Philip.
Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Alistair?
Yes, good morning. Thank you. I wish to declare that I'd considered making a declaration of interest in my capacity as a Highland councillor, but having looked at my position with regard to the items of the agenda, I feel I'm remote enough from the items under discussion not to declare an interest today and to take part in the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair. Heidi.
Thank you, Boyd. Just to say that I'm a non-executive member of the University of the Highlands and the Islands Court, but I've looked at the agenda today and I don't believe there's a conflict of interest today for me.
Thank you, Heidi, and can just remind colleagues to have their microphones switched off when they're not speaking. We're beginning today by recognising the achievements of some of our staff in recent months. And I'm delighted to be able to introduce a number of these colleagues who have received prestigious awards in recognition of significant contributions to the NHS in the Highlands and in Scotland. Present with us today, I hope, are Annie McLean, Cathy Shaw and Charles Blow. And I'm going to ask the awards winners themselves to speak to you shortly. But before I do so, I'm going to ask Heidi to say a few words of introduction. Heidi.
Thank you very much indeed. Just to say a huge welcome to Annie, Cathy and Charlie this morning. What an achievement. Annie McLean will talk to us a little bit about her role and her award, but she successfully completed the Queen's Nursing Institute programme for development, and this is a prestigious award that's been granted to her. Cathy Shaw won the Leader of the Year at the Scottish Health Awards, and will describe a little bit of her work that led to that award. And Charlie Blow is our senior charge nurse on our cardiac unit in Raigmore, and he has won the Cardiovascular Nurse of the Year award, presented by the British Journal of Nursing. So these are very prestigious awards for us as an organisation, and thank you to Annie, Cathy and Charlie for all of their immense hard work and commitment. They're rewarded for a reason, they all do an absolutely superb job. And of course for the organisation, it's wonderful to have people such as Annie, Cathy and Charlie win these awards, because it helps others see that we are a successful, progressive organisation, and we welcome and encourage people to excel. So I'll hand over perhaps to Annie first, Boyd, if that's all right, to talk a little about her award.
Welcome, Annie.
Morning, thank you very much. So just a little very brief synopsis. So my name's Annie McLean, and I'm currently passionately advocating and role modelling the value of advancing district nurse practice in a very remote and rural area. I'm based in West Lochaber, and I cover an area of around about 500 square miles with my small team. I think I was really lucky to be selected to undertake the district nursing Queen's Nurse programme. Actually, it was nearly 2 years ago when I started my journey. As part of the journey, you have to do a big reflective account on how you inspire others by making a difference, inspire others by bringing people with me, inspiring others with tenacity and resilience, and inspiring others with humility and reflection. And then I undertook a 9-month programme, which was actually pretty much in line with the 9 months of when COVID started. So that was a huge challenge as well. Undertaking that. I think what's important is what I now know because of the Queen's Nurses programme is I'm now confident in my leadership and my purpose and in my unique ability to care for my community. And what I really know now is the value that I place on myself directly reflects the value my team and my patients see in me, leading to stronger trust, which enables me to improve their own, enables them to improve their own lives and health choices. And I think that's probably about it, really. But if you've got any questions, I'd be delighted. Anything about district nursing in remote and rural, or anything about the Queen's Nurse programme, I'd be delighted to share it. Thanks.
Thank you, Annie. I had the pleasure of meeting Annie in her workstation, or work base at least, in Strontian in the summer of 2019. Seems a long time ago, pre-pandemic days, and I was mightily impressed by her account of the work that she undertakes over a vast swathe of territory in West Lochaber there. Maybe if there are questions, we can keep them to the end, Heidi, when all three have been introduced. You're on mute, Heidi.
Thank you so much, Boyd. Annie, thank you for that. That's absolutely wonderful. As Boyd says, we'll hold some time at the end for questions, so stay there, please don't leave us. And thank you so much. And congratulations from all of us. We think it's a very special award, so thank you so much. I'll introduce everybody to Cathy Shaw. Cathy, are you there?
I saw her earlier.
I am. Good morning.
Lovely. Good morning, Cathy. Over to you.
Thank you, Heidi. So I'm the lead for the remote and rural support team, which is a group of advanced practitioners covering the whole of the west of the Highlands, and I support the team that is growing in the north of the Highlands. We support the local GPs, particularly the single-handed practices, allowing them to go to study days, take annual leave. We cover their sickness. We also work out of hours, covering the urgent care in some of the very remote areas, one of which Annie covers as well. So we have been in contact with each other. I was nominated for the Leader of the Year by a group of GPs in Portree in Skye, and it was absolutely lovely to be recognised like that. But one of the things that I wasn't expecting was the pleasure that it actually brought to the whole of the team and the GPs and those that I work with. I've had huge amounts of support, and you can't be a good leader without a great team and a great support network. So I recognise that very much. At the moment, we're on 17 in the team. We started with 2 when I arrived about 3.5 years ago. So we're growing, and our reputation is hopefully growing as well. Now we've just got to keep everybody, which we have done for the last 3 years. Fingers crossed on that. Keep them educated, keep them interested, and keep me moving. That's about it.
Thank you, Kathy. That's wonderful. Sorry, Boyd, I'm speaking over you. You go ahead.
No, just nice to see you, Kathy, and many congratulations on that richly deserved award.
Lovely, thank you, Kathy. If you're happy to stay there for a few minutes, we'll introduce Charlie, and then we'll perhaps take some questions at the end. So thank you, and again, congratulations. I think that's a very special award and well deserved. So well done, you. I'd like to introduce Charlie. Charlie Blow is our senior charge nurse on our coronary care unit in NHS Highland in Raigmore. So over to you, Charlie.
Thanks very much, Heidi, and good morning to the board. Thanks for the opportunity to share our work with you. The UK Cardiovascular Nurse of the Year Award was given to me and more especially to my team for work we've been doing for about 7 or 8 years now around the early management of patients with myocardial infarction or heart attacks. Certain types of heart attacks require the administration of a drug called a thrombolytic or clotbuster drug. And research over many years has shown that every 1 minute delay in administering that treatment reduces a patient's life expectancy by, every 1 minute delay reduces life expectancy by 11 days. So in other words, a 30-minute delay to your treatment can take a year off your life. And when you look at the rurality of our population, that becomes considerable. Now, 7 or 8 years ago, only 15% of patients with MIs were receiving that treatment at the point of being seen by the paramedics. The remainder were transported into Raigmore with delays of 1 hour, 1.5 hours, and so on. So we identified the main reason for that delay as being lack of expertise in interpreting the initial electrocardiogram. So we set up an IT infrastructure that allowed paramedics to transmit those ECGs from the patient's home within a minute of the paramedics arriving there. That would then appear on the screen in coronary care and alert our staff with an audible alarm. And then a team of nurses that were trained up would engage in dialogue with the paramedic and offer them diagnostic support. So fast forward 7 years, we now have 4,500 ECGs a year coming in from paramedics and GPs. Something in the region of 96% of patients now receive that treatment at home compared to 15% 7 or 8 years ago. And we've also done a huge amount of work in keeping patients away from the hospital by offering GPs and paramedics reassurance about the clinical condition and the ECG. We've also, of course, got the capacity to compare that ECG to historic ones by immediately accessing the Muse system. So it's been a great bit of work. It's required a huge amount of cooperation between the ambulance service and the cardiac nurses, but we're immensely proud of the impact that it's made, and a lot of patients are alive now following heart attacks that wouldn't have been had it not been for this work.
Thank you, Charlie. We heard a lot about innovation yesterday in our discussions about our objectives and the strategy going forward, and you've just demonstrated that, and many congratulations on your award. Back to you, Heidi.
Thank you very much. So Charlie, thank you so much, and congratulations from me too, and the team. A hugely well-deserved award. We've been very lucky to have you here in the board, and the same with Kathy and Annie too, in terms of the really excellent level of care that you guys provide. So thank you so much. Boyd, over to you for questions, perhaps.
Yeah, thank you, Heidi. And I'm going to invite questions. There's one coming in from Deirdre, and I'll go straight to Deirdre now, and then to Alex.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Heidi. But most of all, a huge thank you to our three contributors. You know, it was really humbling to hear about your work and your contribution to your communities. It's absolutely tremendous, and it's wonderful to have such committed staff within NHS Highland. You know, the talent it's all inspiring, it truly is. My question is for Annie. Annie, I live in Sutherland, which is geographically an area I would say as large as yours. You know, it's very remote and rural, and I wonder, is there anything else we could be doing to attract district nurses and, you know, to attract people into very remote rural district nursing?
That is a challenge definitely, which we've experienced ourselves in our team here and have overcome. I think it's about the people, it's about the team, it's about making it welcoming. I mean, obviously, the job as well, so making educational opportunities, so making sure that people have access to specialist qualifications, advanced practice, and that's it really. I mean, you're fighting against important specialism, which really does keep our community safe. So I think it is just about making sure that we are offering support, mentorship, education, and that people aren't feeling isolated and alone. I mean, MS Teams has been amazing to bring people together, and that's been a huge positive of the pandemic. I used to feel quite isolated in my practice, but now I definitely feel a lot more connected. So it's just all of those things combined, really. There's no magic wand, and you want people who are passionate about it and not just coming for the wrong reasons. So that's important too when you're looking after a community. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you very much, Annie, and good luck with the rest of your career.
And now to Alex, and then Adam.
Thanks, Chair, and congratulations to all of you. I echo what Deirdre says. It's marvellous to see not just the work that you've done, but the enthusiasm and the passion that you're portraying for the work you're doing. Charlie, my questions to you. I was very interested in what you were saying about the heart attack and how you deal with this and the connection that you've got to the paramedics. Is that across the whole of Highland? Are you getting that information from paramedics in Caithness and other rural parts, or is that a service that is going to their local hospital? There's a team there as well.
No, it's a service that we provide across the whole of the Highlands. So the paramedics in Caithness, for example, would transmit their ECGs to us. Obviously, Shetland and so on, they would make contact to Aberdeen. So they don't have in fact, the system we've got is the only one in the UK where we accept every transmission from the paramedics. And we think that's important as well, Alex, because quite often the paramedic's not sure if it is a heart attack or not, whereas other hospitals will only accept ECGs coming into their cath lab if the paramedic is sure it's a heart attack. So yeah, in answer to your question, we're covering the whole of the the Highlands, and we also offer the service out to all of the GPs in the Highlands. And I say we get about 15 transmissions a day coming in, mainly during daytime hours. About 4 of them are from GPs and the remainder from paramedics. And quite often a GP will be sitting with a patient in their surgery, unsure of whether to admit them or not, because they've got a query about some element of the ECG. So they'll simply put the ECG through to us and follow up with an immediate phone call, and we can reassure them or otherwise.
Thanks, Charlie. Just a quick extension, Boyd, to follow up on that. Across most of the rural areas, they also have the emergency defibrillators that are within village halls, and in fact there's one outside my golf club. That's how I know of it. Are they linked in at all, or could they be linked in, or would that help?
No, they don't have the necessary infrastructure to transmit an ECG. So the defibrillators, Alex, will only diagnose the heart rhythm. In other words, they'll tell you if the patient's in a cardiac arrest or not. What they're not able to do is tell you if the patient's having a heart attack, which is a different thing to a cardiac arrest. So the infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, only exists from the paramedics defibrillators, because they combine an ECG machine and defibrillator, whereas the AEDs are really just for recognising cardiac arrest. So in all honesty, it wouldn't really be a factor there anyway, because the immediate management of cardiac arrest is to shock the patient and get them in, whereas the immediate management of heart attack is quite often to administer the clotbuster drug.
That's lovely. Thanks very much, Charlie, and good luck to all 3 of you in the future.
Boyd, you were on mute, but I think you're probably inviting me to ask my question. And yes, now, thanks. This is not planned on us, but my question's for Kathy. Well, but first of all, just to say, echo what others have said about thanks for the amazing achievements of all 3 of you, and how welcome it is to have you come along and talk briefly about the awards and how they were achieved. But Kathy, we've got an item later on the agenda today about culture, and an update about what's happening about the culture programme in the board. Now, you don't get to be leader of the year without having a very good team culture, I'm sure, and you touched on how your team's expanded considerably. So what are some of your secrets, I suppose, for a good and positive culture in your team?
Well, I wouldn't want to sound twee, but literally it's about respect. So I respect every member of the team that I work with. I give them time to be able to talk to me, to offload. It can be incredibly tiring to do that, but if you're going to keep a team together, then that's the level of input that you need, and it literally is that. I mean, Teams is amazing to be able to talk to people, but it still requires that face-to-face. People still need to see you, so I do an awful lot of traveling. I make sure that I'm available in the different areas as and when I attend team meetings, and I encourage people to think differently, and to come to me with their ideas, and then I try and smooth the pathway for them to be able to bring those ideas forward. So we've done an awful lot of different work as well, which keeps people interested, and yeah, mainly it's about respect, I think.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you very much.
We come now to Margaret, and the final one will be Pam. But Margaret.
Thanks very much, Chair, and just again, once again, congratulations to all 3 of you. With my other hat on, I'm part of North and West Highland, and I know how difficult it is to get staff, to keep staff. So really huge congratulations for the work that you do and continue to do. The question I have for you is around sharing your success, and it's great to see you here today, and I think we're all really heartened to hear your stories. But I just wonder what your opinion would be in terms of how you should share your success as widely as possible throughout the professions. And I think that goes beyond nurses, midwives and AHPs. I just wondered what your thoughts are about that, because I think we really should be capitalising, because that in itself helps people to see what the art of the possible is, in terms of, you know, you probably look upon what a lot of what you've done is your data, it's your job, it's what you do. So I'm just really keen to hear what you think about that, all three of you.
I'm not sure we'll have time for all three to
okay.
Margaret, but maybe if any one of the three wants to volunteer to respond on behalf of the three. Kathy. She's a manager, she responds.
I can never keep anything to myself. I think, I mean, there's an awful lot that we could actually do. That we've had, certainly the rural support team, we've had articles written about us, and we've pushed things about how we work. We work very closely with a lot of teams. We attend the advanced practitioner forums and conferences and take part in that, and also help to develop those. It would be great to get into the universities and talk about, you know, what we've done, all three of us, I think, to inspire or challenge some of our future nurses and AHPs, and as Margaret says, there is a vast array of people that actually work for NHS Highland, and they can all be encouraged, I think, by what is achievable here. So just having the opportunity to get out and about and speak to people, not necessarily at the moment, because I think it's difficult and we're all under a lot of pressure at the moment, trying to do our normal day jobs and a little bit else, but it would be great to speak to people about it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Kathy, again. And now Pam.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you very much to all three of you again. That was just super to hear, and it's not so much a question, it's just a couple of comments. I think you've all articulated leadership at its best. I think the kind of straightforward aspects of respect and value with your team members, and I absolutely agree with you, Kathy, that your team around you, if you want to be a good leader, you need a good team around you, but your responsibility is to bring out the best in them and to support them in that, and that's the kind of leadership that we want to prevail in our organisation. And the second comment is to you, Charlie, in terms of we talk about integration a lot, and integrated care, and we often default to just some of the simple kind of narrative that sits around health and social care integration. Well, probably simple is the wrong word, it's not simple. But you have just given an absolutely fantastic example of integration. So working with the key people to keep our patients safe and to make sure they get the best care. And the team varies depending on the task. So I thank you for that. I think that's an exemplary example of integrated care. So thank you. And I look forward to meeting you all at the point I'm allowed to. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Thanks, Pam. And can I just echo Pam's remarks and how proud we are of all of you in NHS Highland. You are a great credit to yourselves, obviously, but a great credit to NHS Highland. And we are so fortunate to have people of your calibre and commitment working for us. And I wish you all success as you go forward in your careers. Thank you very much for joining us today, and thank you on behalf of all of us on the board for all you do. And I can see that Anne is itching to get back to work already. And thanks to Heidi for introducing you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. that was a departure from our normal routine, as you can gather, but Pam and I felt it was important to recognise these wonderful contributions and to have that kind of introductory session, which we might repeat again because there are others who have received awards, and we'll try and arrange that at a future date. Can I go back to the more mundane matters of the minutes of the meeting of 24 November? And can I check with you for accuracy for these minutes? Page 1. Margaret, you wanted to come in?
Sorry, it's not till page 13, Boyd. Do you want me to go ahead or wait?
Well, I'll just wait just now, yeah. Good. Page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Ruth, you wanted to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Boyd. I'm just aware of a tiny typo on page 7. We talk about the root cause analysis, and the spelling is wrong of that. Also, just as you're around to approach the later stages of the minute, the eagle-eyed amongst you might have spotted, in fact, that there was an undertaking to bring back to the board at this meeting a revised version of the Staff Governance Committee minute. That hasn't happened this time round, but since there will be a Staff Governance Committee meeting in February, I intend to bring a revised November minute and the February draft minute to the board at its next meeting at the end of March.
Okay, Margaret, your correction.
Yes, it's on page 13, and it's 2.3.2 workforce, and I think the end of the second sentence is meant to say the Staff Governance Committee, but it's missing. By the Staff Governance Committee. Is that correct?
Margaret, I think you're referring to the next item on the agenda. I think you're referring to item 8. I think that's the Risk Management and Board Assurance Framework.
Yeah.
Oh, I do apologise. Sorry.
There isn't a page 13 in the minutes.
Sorry.
long as they are. Okay, any further corrections to the minutes? If not, we accept them as an accurate record of proceedings at the November meeting. And are there any matters arising that anybody wishes to raise at this juncture that aren't covered by other business? Not seeing any hands up, so assuming there isn't anything else, in that case we move to item 6, which is the Chief Executive's report, a verbal update of emerging issues, and over to you, Pam.
Sorry, clicked the wrong button. Well, good morning, everyone, and I guess since we last met, we've had Christmas, the Christmas period take place, and a lot has happened in our life, and particularly in relation to the pandemic. And I'm not going to take away from the overview that Tim is probably going to give you around the state of play, but we have been through quite a challenging time. Obviously, the reports before Christmas in terms of our levels of infection, etc., moved forward significantly. And over the Christmas New Year period, it was much higher infection rates and lots of responses to that. We also obviously were underway with the vaccination programme, and on Hogmanay, the rules around that and the parameters around that changed. So we had to come back with a vengeance really, and redraft our plans and understand exactly how we were going to get pace and scale around that vaccination programme. And I probably just want to note the kind of work of the team and all the people around this in terms of making that happen. And again, I'll leave Tim to give you the overview and how we're doing with that when we get to that item. So it's been a very busy time. It's affected all parts of the business. It's affected all of us in our daily lives. So it's been a significant change, and again, and you'll hear more about the organisational response to that from Tim. We also, when we came back in January, Boyd Robertson, myself, Tim Allison and Dave Garden represented the board at the Health and Sports Committee, and we had to go over, submit things before Christmas and then give a live presentation and interaction with the ministers of that committee, and we managed to do that, and hopefully the performance that we were able to outline landed well with ministers. I can't confirm or deny whether that was the case, but we certainly, I think as a team, felt that we gave that a strong performance, and that we, again, with the help of the team around us, were able to provide the information that was required, bar one or two things that we're following up on. So that was good. That was another opportunity, to represent the board and show the work that we are doing. I think throughout this time, the staff commitment has just been amazing, and in very extreme circumstances, and we continue to try and understand how we can support that positive culture, and also how we can make sure that we have well-being of our staff at the forefront of considering what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and that will continue. I think the last area I want to just mention is that we are, whilst we're doing all this, of course, trying to still operate a level of business as usual. We're trying not to drop things unless we really need to, and that's a fine balance in terms of everything that we need to contend with. We are also expected to deliver our revised remobilisation plans by the end of February, and we have people underway working on that with all our departments to try and bring that to the right place. And of course, that will go through the board for approval before we start the new financial year. So extremely busy, and Boyd and I were at a national meeting yesterday with chairs and chief executives and officials from the government, including the Cabinet Secretary, where looking to the future was the key discussion about what would be different and what do we learn from what we've experienced through this pandemic, and how do we improve going forward. So those are all very live discussions at the moment in the board and nationally, and we will continue to work and support that. So those are the key issues for me this morning. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Pam before anybody raises their hands? I just wanted to say that Pam gave an excellent presentation at that meeting yesterday afternoon, the national meeting of chief executives and chairs with the Cabinet Secretary, and I hope that she will be able to share that presentation with the board on a future occasion. Graham Hardy.
Thanks, Chair. Hi, Pam. Yeah, it's interesting, Pam, reading the news this morning, and it's obviously quite a new issue, but they were saying that the EU were going to restrict some export of vaccinations to countries outside the EU. Obviously, it's a new item, and I don't know if you have any more information about that, or how we might proceed, or would it affect NHS Highland at all? Or
I'm sorry, Graham, at this point I wouldn't be able to give a full answer to that, and I guess when Tim's doing his overview he may be able to comment on it, but okay. I haven't had any indication of us being directly affected at this point. That's not to say that's not possible.
Okay, thanks, Pam.
A very topical issue, Graham, indeed. Any other questions or points for Pam? Okay, thank you, Pam. And we move on, I think, now to the Integrated Finance and Performance Report. And David is going to do the choreography around this item, I think, bringing people in to talk about the different elements of it. So over to you, David.
Thanks very much, Boyd. So colleagues will have a copy of the Integrated Performance and Quality Report. We will follow the pattern that we have in previous board meetings. There are 4 principal sections within the report. We'll go section by section, and I'll ask executives just a few brief words of introduction to it, as well as the chairs of the relevant committee, and then we'll open it up for Q&A for each section. I would remind us that we've got 40 minutes for this item. There are 4 sections, so please keep your comments brief. My introduction will also be brief. I would say that this report is one that we will continue to develop and refine. So if there are any comments that you want to feed back out with the meeting with regard to the content, the commentary, or the compilation of it, then please come directly back to me. The other thing just to mention is that the timing of the data, then obviously the data for the most part goes up to the end of November. Some items to the end of October. It's just the cut-off that's required in terms of compiling the report and then filtering that through the various committees that would review it. Finally, just to say, these are not all of our performance and finance metrics that we have. The various committees will have an extended view. This is very much a compilation of summary associated with each of them. But again, if there are details that you would like to see added to this, that would make the report more whole, then again, I'd be happy to take that feedback. So with those words, I'm going to come firstly to clinical governance, and perhaps invite Boyd, then Heidi, and then Gaynor to make comment around that section. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, colleagues. I'm Boyd Peters, the Medical Director for NHS Highland. The Integrated Performance Report has been developed now over the course of the last 6 months, still being improved and developed to create something that is relevant to not just the higher levels of the organisation, but we hope will in time be filtered out throughout all parts of the organisation to create a greater awareness of some of the high level metrics that apply to NHS Highland. The sections I'll talk to just for a minute are the ones around adverse events and complaints, freedom of information. And these are these elements are look at some of our what we do, how we look into situations that have had an adverse event or outcome to improve, keep an improvement culture, and at the same time how we look after people who have questions or who wish to come back to us after they've been looked after by us. So these metrics are there, and we're focusing on improving where we see opportunities to improve, to try and maintain a high customer focus. We also have included freedom of information, as it's something that's measurable and is another way that we supply information to the public. And lastly, the one that I'll mention, I've got some metrics now on readmissions, and we will, in the course of this year, look into those in greater detail. You'll see in that graph in the more detail section that approximately 1 in 10 of our admissions will come back in within 28 days. We will conduct more looking into that in the coming 12 months, but we do believe that some of it is related to the geography and demography of the Highlands, but undoubtedly some of it may be related to our systems, and we'll be looking to see, we can't help what age our population is or the fact that they live a very long way from a hospital and so sometimes clinical decisions are made with those logistics in mind. But there may be other factors that we can look at and learn from, and perhaps shape our systems as we go forward. Some of that work is hampered a bit by COVID, and we still don't really know what the future will be like with COVID. We await, we all await finding out that. So there are some caveats to how we work this year and what we can do. The only other interesting thing, I suppose, is that we're beginning to see a pattern of a higher readmission rate in mental health. We don't know if that's significant or what it means, but it's there in the graph, and it'll be something that we will probably dive down into in the course of the next 6 months. Is it related to COVID, or is it related to something else? And that will be a question. So the idea of the metrics is it's not so much a performance measurement as an opportunity to understand where we're at in terms of how we're functioning, and to seek out the opportunities to improve, and also to get some early detection on any areas where we need to do more work to pull us back to the standards that we would normally wish to meet. Thanks, that'll do for me. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Shall I come in?
Yes, please.
Okay, lovely. So following on from what Boyd has had to say, obviously in a situation where we're in a global pandemic, it's absolutely critical that we understand whether we're performing well and safely during this time, and of course these measures are part of a suite of measures that we use to help us look at that. And there's a number of measures here, but I'm just going to focus today on pressure ulcers and infection control. So just in relation to pressure ulcers, then we've seen a sustained reduction in the numbers of grade 2, 3 and 4 pressure ulcers. These are the higher grade pressure ulcers that are very serious for people. And we've done well there. New guidelines have been published now around pressure ulcers, but interestingly have shied away from setting up the targets. But we're gradually working our way through those guidelines in terms of how we can use them to improve the care for our patients and our residents, and also, of course, our population. You'll see in the pie chart that a large proportion of the care that we provide is to people being admitted into hospital with a pressure ulcer from home. So this year we are going to focus on how we can help communities really reduce pressure ulcers and reduce the risk of people in their own homes and in care homes developing pressure ulcers. So we are just mapping that out at the moment. Slowed down a little bit, of course, by COVID, but we have a fair understanding of what we need to do. We know that we want to work with care at home teams and carers in terms of training and education and support. And we'll do that through our community nursing teams and our specialist nursing teams. So that's a big piece of work that we will take forward. And then just in relation to infection prevention and control, we continue to do well in relation to Staph aureus bacteremia. The national target is 15.3 cases per 100,000 acute occupied bed days. We're currently sitting at 5. So we're actually performing extraordinarily well there, and long may that continue. And in relation to Clostridium difficile, slightly different case here. The target is 14.9 cases per 100,000 occupied bed days, and we're currently sitting on 23.5. We have a number of actions in place to help us turn this situation around. The timeline to reach this target is March 22, so we do have some time to do this. We're focusing on our antimicrobial prescribing. We have definitely seen a reduction in antimicrobial prescribing during the COVID pandemic, and we're hoping that this will very much impact on our Clostridium difficile rates. We did see halfway through last year a rise in the north and west and in the Inverness area in cases. None of them were linked. We type tested them. but we're gradually seeing a reduction now in terms of the cases that we're seeing. So happy to take any questions from anybody.
Thanks, Heidi. And maybe if I can invite Gaynor, who's chair of our Clinical Governance Committee, if she wants to make any comment.
Thank you. Just to let you know that the Clinical Governance Committee met on the 14th of January of this year. Thanks to Boyd and Heidi for going through some of the detail of the Integrated Performance Report for that committee, which you can see in pages 10 to 19. The only thing to report in terms of our performance measures is that at the January meeting, the committee agreed to review the performance measures for adverse events and the serious adverse event reviews. So we'll be looking to look at those measures for the April IPR. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gaynor. Do you want me just to manage the hands as we go through this, Boyd? Is that okay?
Please, yes, do.
Okay, Alex, I think you were first up.
Yeah, thanks, David. Couple of questions. First, a comment. I think the whole integrated report is coming on. It's going well, but we've still got bits and pieces of mathematical errors and things that's given us a problem in the spreadsheet, probably, or the database. So we need to keep looking at that. And I'll give you a shout outside the meeting, David, to point out just exactly where I see those to be. In terms of the clinical governance bit, Boyd, I don't know if it's yourself or Pam, the freedom of information requests, the fact that there looks like they're jumping up. This is, I'm trying to think, it's on page 21, I think, of the report. Have we got enough resource to deal with this? Because I'm aware of the fact that an FOI has a time bar, or at least a time limit, and when we should be responding to this. Clearly, if we've got MPs and MSPs asking these questions, for whatever reason, we've got to put some resource to dealing with it and getting the information. So have we got the resource, and can we get more if needs be?
Yeah, so I mean, those we have got resource. We've got a member of staff who's dedicated to doing it, and it's mostly not MSPs who submit FOIs, but it's members of the public. Sometimes, you know, from a whole variety of backgrounds, and sometimes coming from all around the country. I'm pretty sure some of the requests come from people who are writing to all boards and trusts in the UK. So it's quite a breadth of work. There's not a predictability to it, but if it became a resourcing issue, we would have to consider that. I suppose we've put it in for now as a metric. It's there, and it simply represents a little bit of our front-facing and some of the work of the department that is all within the clinical governance and feedback team, and it's part of that body of work. However, we have no control over the number of FOIs that come in, and it varies greatly from month to month or season to season. And the flavour of what comes in as well is outside of our control. What we do want to do is to, where possible, do well against the national standards, and so we'll set resources up to meet that requirement.
On the emergency readmission rate performance graph that you've got there, which is very good and very interesting, are we going to? Is the intention A, to set a target for ourselves, or B, to go and benchmark against other boards and then look at a target?
So the danger of it, yes, but the danger of it is that if we set a target when we don't really understand what it means, then we may find that we don't deliver because we didn't understand what we were doing. So the first thing is to try and understand it a bit better. It's been something that's been an awareness and a discussion item for years, but we had, before COVID came upon us, the intention was that over the course of 2020, later 2020, and also this year, we would look at this as something, and it would become one of the items that the Clinical Governance Committee was interested in, to see what did it mean, and is there an opportunity to learn something from it that helps us to improve services. It has been snookered a bit, because as we can see, and we will get from the COVID update when it comes, it's fairly clear that things are not going to really return to what we knew before COVID, and it's very likely that 2021 will be a year that we couldn't have predicted, and so how we fit in doing anything will be a bit different. So we'll have to consider this going forward. It is still there, and it will be a good thing to understand. That will be some work that I think we should do if we're able to in the course of this year.
Thanks, Boyd.
Thank you. Anne.
Thanks, David. So I have a question for Heidi in a minute, but first of all, just in terms of your request for feedback. So first of all, well done to yourself and the team that are working on this, because I think this time round, although I'm sure there's a lot you still want to do to it, there was clear evidence of this having been used by the organisation in terms of an update on lots of the narrative and new things coming in and things going out. So that's great to see. So thanks for that. And I look forward to the discussion that we're having at the Health and Social Care Committee in March about what indicators relevant to that committee we might bring forward into the report going forward. But I wanted to also, I suppose, pose a challenge and to the team responsible for this later in the agenda, not just in Tim's update, but in his annual report. We've got a lot of quite serious information there about the implications for inequalities in health of the pandemic and how that has exacerbated already underlying inequalities that existed. And I suppose my challenge, therefore, is how, if at all, should we bring something into this report which gives an indication as to how we're managing to address some of those inequalities. I appreciate that, as the report points out, much of that work has to be done with our partners, but there were a number of recommendations in Tim's report in relation to our work. So that's my challenge to you and the team, is to have a think about how going forward we might try and reflect whether we're succeeding in addressing any of those inequalities. So I'll let you think about that, and I'll ask Heidi my question, which was about the pressure ulcers. Heidi, the report mentions how we're trying to focus on improving the situation in the community, working with care.
You've just muted yourself, Anne.
How did I do that? Honestly, it's the gremlins. So I don't know how much of that you heard, Heidi.
I lost you at the critical moment.
Okay, so the report refers to training we're doing with care at home and care home staff to try and improve the situation in terms of community acquired ulcers. I just wondered whether we do, or whether we could or should extend some of that training to work with carers and families.
Most definitely, Anne. So I think one of the things that we will look at is exactly what does happen now. So 30 years ago, when I went out with the district nurse, when I was a student nurse, into people's homes, when we were caring for older people, we did a huge amount of training for carers around how to position and change positions for their loved ones so that they didn't develop pressure ulcers. And one thinks that goes on, but life becomes busy, it becomes complex. And one of the things that we will need to do is to understand exactly what we're currently doing. But I can't envisage a future where we're not working with the carers in terms of training and education and supporting them as well. It's not just about training and education, though that's very important. It's about advice and being there for them in terms of helping them. So yes, definitely in the future, I would wish to see a very comprehensive approach to that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on. Just a reminder of time, folks. I know there's a lot of information within the report. If we can keep our questions to the point and also our answers as well, please. And it's a difficult one today, but let's do our best. Sarah.
Thanks, David. I'll try and be quick. It's a question for Boyd on adverse events. The report shows us an increase in adverse events in November, but I noticed from the commentary that at the same time in the year, we also had a change in policy and procedure. And I'm just asking about the data. Are we seeing a genuine increase in adverse events, or is that a reflection of the change of parameters around what we report and how? And sorry, second part of the question is that I noticed it talks about rolling out the change in policy and procedure around adverse events, and I just wanted to know how we're getting on with rolling that out. Thanks.
Yeah. So there's two parts. So the first one, you neatly helped me to identify that colleagues need to guard against reading too much into the increase or decrease stuff. Unfortunately, one of the weaknesses of the IPR is that some of the trends and patterns really have to be looked at over a long period of time. And so something like adverse events will vary quite a lot from report. The numbers can go up and down without any sort of predictability to it, and it isn't necessarily that we can draw a conclusion about this overall services from that. Some of these things that happen will do so fairly randomly. You can get several all happening at once and then none of a particular type for a month, and the numbers in each section will go up and down. So that element is not helpful always. What we are looking for in SAERs is to see, are we identifying all of them, and are we putting them through process in the right time frame? And so we're diving down into the topic of that, and also DATIX, which is the sort of alert system that's used nationally, to try and understand better our compliance with that and how things are coming up through it, and what intelligence there is below what you see, which is a very high level metric, which unfortunately doesn't tell you what I think you were trying to establish, which is there a pattern up or down. It doesn't overly help, unfortunately, although it does give us a rough idea. So the answer is that we do watch it, but we have to watch it in a different context. And some of the SAER data that we gather, because of the timelines that you have, you're always in arrears as well, so that complicates. Getting a way of simplifying this into something that can appear in this kind of report means that you do skip over a lot of this, and I don't want to spend a lot of time obviously today going into some of that detail. I'm happy to take it offline if it's helpful. The processes are really not greatly changed. There was some national tweaks, and we've simply gathered it together and refreshed it. It's barely any different to what it was before. Hopefully we've made it so it's a bit more enabling. Rolling out of training is always difficult because the time-honoured way of having meetings and sessions and doing that can't happen. We have done it in mental health, and I think the team that we're delivering it have taken away some lessons in how we might deliver it in this new way of working. But a lot of staff already have had the training that would help them to know how to do it. What we're trying to do is to build up sort of more people in the organisation who have done that, so that there's always a good number of people that are familiar with the process and are able in each of their departments to help manage the process through when we have to look at something to work out where we went wrong and what we might do about that.
Thanks. Thank you, Boyd and Sarah. Finally, in this section, if I can come to Bert.
Thanks, David. I had 2 points. The first one was about SCERs, but that's been covered by Sarah and Boyd, so thank you for that. My second is in relation to complaints. I noticed the improvement that has been in terms of performance regarding the completion of complaint responses. We were sitting at 80 open complaints in April, and I think that's now down to 35. I noticed that a significant number exceeded 300 days at the April stage, and I wonder if there has been an improvement in the length of time that it is taking to make these responses. I appreciate that some of these things can be indeed very complex, but 300 days is something around 10 months. Following on from that, I noticed that a current challenge in relation to complaints is to improve the quality of responses. I wonder if you could explain that a little bit more, and indeed, does that in any way contribute to the length of time that is taking for some of the responses which exceed 300 days? Thank you.
It's that's going to take quite a lengthy answer. Yeah. So I think that Boyd, if you want to briefly answer the point, and it might be that we can follow up with more detail at a later stage, Bert, but it's a good question.
Yeah, so we're definitely looking to improve across the board in many things, and the ones that go on for a long time are usually complex, and sometimes there are other issues that make it difficult to close it off. We are the main metric is that complaints should be looked at and dealt with or responded to within 20 working days. But obviously there are issues where to fully investigate and understand what the issue is will take longer and might involve quite a number of different staff who, because of the way that care is delivered nowadays. So for some, it will inevitably take longer. In terms of the quality of response, it's about looking at how we can, in our communications out about what happened and about how the organisation is thinking and feeling about that. These things are important, and so there's a constant journey of trying to tell people what they've asked about or unhappy about in a way that looks after them, answers the questions and explains them in simple terms, and reflects that the organisation is on an improvement journey, and from these when things go wrong, wants to learn and also regrets anything that hasn't gone as well as the clinicians or other staff intended. And so it's really just about fine-tuning some of these things, and we want to just reflect some of that improvement journey in the commentary. It will always be that we're trying to improve things, I think. I'm not sure I'll ever put a commentary in that says, well, we've stopped trying to improve now, we don't want to improve our quality anymore, we're quite happy with where we're at. I suspect I might not ever write that. So we just want to capture that there are a number of areas of interest where we're particularly looking at things and making tweaks without getting into the detail too much of it.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the next section. And this is actually one of the larger sections, so again, a challenge for us in terms of time. Catherine, I'm going to invite you to talk about the performance, and that covers the pages, pretty much pages 20 to 25 in your report. And then I'm going to ask Louise and Joanna to comment on pages 32 to 51, which looks at some of the ministerial indicators. And then I'll ask Alex to make comment. Again, let's leave as much time for Q&A as we possibly can. Thanks, Catherine.
Okay, thanks, David. And what I plan to do, in view of the fact I've been trying to shorten my presentation as time has been running on. So high-level points just to note and to bring out, and then I'm happy to take questions, are that particularly in terms of if you look at our activity plans, looking across outpatients and TTG, you'll note that we have now, as a board, we are achieving very close to and around about what our original plan was. So that's really good news for us, and just something that I wanted the board to be aware of. We continue to be challenged around our cancer delivery, and we have a subgroup of our Performance Recovery Board that is dedicated to looking at action that needs to be taken to improve our cancer performance. And we are also, as a part of trying to improve our capacity to deliver to some of the challenges around cancer, we are linking out with the Health Board, and indeed there is a collaboration going on between us and Elgin, working closely with the Scottish Government to create something differently around that. And integral to our cancer performance is actually understanding our diagnostic position. And just to note again, the good news that in terms of our scopes performance and the number of patients waiting for scope, we have significantly impacted that as a result of the action that we've taken to introduce capacity. And the building of our 4th endoscopy room is also moving at pace now and should be concluded by the end of this financial year. So those are the main points that, David, I wanted to highlight through my presentation, and I'm happy to take other questions by exception.
Thanks, Catherine. That's really helpful. Before we take questions, I'm going to ask Louise and then Joanna and then Alex to make comment, and then we'll take questions around that full section if I may. So, Louise, can I come to you first?
Yeah, absolutely. Just again, for time's sake, I'm going to particularly focus on a couple of areas. One is the data around CAMS and psychological therapies. Now, at the moment, we clearly have data for Argyll and Bute and North Highland within our information, but we're currently working to try and have a pan-Highland approach to these two areas because they are particular areas of focus. You'll see from the information there that the waiting times for CAMS is fairly stable and slightly above the Scottish position. However, it's not where we want it to be. One of our particular challenges when you look at the actual referral rates, so if we go back to April to now, we're getting almost 3 times the number of referrals at the moment. So just keeping stable is tricky, and we've got to show improvement. And the same position really for psychology. Unfortunately, over this period that we're looking at, we have had a deterioration in our 0 to 18 week wait times, but equally we've had threefold level of referrals. So we've got to work out how we manage both of those pressures and show improvement. So with that end, we've got a new programme board that starts on the 5th of February, and the first piece of work that group is going to look at is what the data is telling us, which is what I've just described, but also improvement plans for each of those key areas. So the Argyll and Bute and for North Highland for CAMS and psychology. Within that, we've also got some benchmarking. So we've got a speaker coming from another area board to tell us about the improvement work they've done, so that we're learning from others and become a sort of real learning organisation. So that's a key area of hotspot for us at the moment. Just to briefly mention delayed discharges, which is a real focus of our attention as well. We've got another programme dedicated to improving that. We have seen improvements, particularly in the mental health around that, and our enhanced community service is really helping, particularly in the Inverness area. That's showing early signs of real progress with this time last year, and certainly for the 4 previous years, our average length of stay in the RNI, which is the community hospital in Inverness, was averaging 30 days. Now it's 9.3 days. So that is showing that we're actually managing to move people through and get that flow improving. It's early days and we've got to extend that much more, but equally the work that we've heard from Annie and Kathy will be doing that as well in other areas. So we've just got to make sure that we link up across the board and get that right.
Thanks, Louise. And if I can come to Joanna, and just to remind folks to mute their lines once they're finished. Thanks, Joanna.
Oops.
Thank you very much. Yes, so Louise has covered quite a bit of improvement work, and hopefully the board are getting a flavour of how we're working. Catherine, Louise and I meet a minimum of once a week. We have got daily huddles, and we're really taking a whole system approach around improvement and clinical leadership and professional support. So Louise has already mentioned CAMHS and mental health, which is an area obviously that's of quite high profile in Argyll and Bute as well. We're also now on a daily basis, 7 days a week, monitoring our A&E admission, and you'll see that we've had some dips, but we've actually had some pretty good performance considering where we are in the pandemic. For us in Argyll and Bute as well, that continued focus on people who are delayed in hospital and ensuring their pathway, and we're sharing learning across the whole of NHS Highland around how we improve that and maintain that, as well as the real focus on care homes that we've maintained throughout the pandemic, which has been really important to do with the changes and different directives that have come in, but ultimately within NHS Highland about our care and commitment to the residents and their families in care homes. And finally for me, just aware of time, but happy to take questions, really an ongoing issue for us in Argyll and Bute in particular around our electives and the ability of Greater Glasgow and Clyde to support us due to the prevalence of COVID that they are still working through within our Glasgow and Clyde. So I'll pause there. Hopefully didn't run through too quickly. I'm happy to take questions.
Thanks, Joanna. And it feels almost a little unfair, Alex, if you wanted to comment, because I recognise this report is not, we didn't have a Finance and Performance Committee in January, so you've not reviewed the report, but is there any comment that you want to add just out of courtesy?
No, I actually I'm quite amazed at how well we're doing, especially with the COVID, the amount of work that's going on. The only thing I've got with, and it's Boyd had mentioned it earlier with the IPR, the report itself, is the numbers we're looking at is November. Now, clearly, both Louise and Joanne and Kathy were talking to what's happening now. So it's comparing the two is a bit more difficult because obviously the impact of COVID and the latest wave was coming through December, January, rather than the numbers we're looking at. So perhaps we're getting a slightly false picture in terms of the report, but clearly not in terms of the presentation. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. I think that is a fair point that you're making. There always will be a time lag given the construct of trying to put these reports through our subcommittees before it comes to the board. But recognising that the diligence around the ongoing performance is happening on a weekly basis. So if I can open up to any Q&A associated with that section that we've just covered. Alistair.
Yeah, thank you. I think my question is probably more related to Catherine. If you still get, I appreciate time is of the essence on this for this slot, but it's very important, and a lot of people will be, listening to what you're saying about the cancer numbers. And I'm actually looking at, I think it's page 26, and I think you've got some items on page 26 that are in red, where they actually should be in green in terms of, if I'm reading it right, in terms of the cancer treatment in the first days. For instance, if you look, at some of them, we seem to have exceeded the planned actually. The actual actually exceeded the plan. So, but more so going back to the comments you made, what reassurance can you give us as to when this will start to improve and when we'll start to be where you actually want it to be, Catherine?
Yeah, so I'm hopeful, Alistair, that we will see improvement coming through February and into March. We have a plan in relation to urology that involves some building work to create a space for more urology patients to be seen within Raigmore, and that's something that we've taken some funding and we had a project plan around. And in essence, it's a one-stop clinic. So instead of patients having to come have a diagnostic test, come back again to see the consultant, come back again, it's about them coming in a one-stop shop. And obviously that is going to reduce the length of time it takes for us to get the patients through the cancer pathway. So we're anticipating that making a significant impact. The other thing we are working with, as I've mentioned, working with our partners in Grampian, trying to increase our capacity, particularly around urology, to ensure that we have simply enough manpower to deliver the service. And as you know, urologists are in short supply. So in addition to doing that, we are also developing nursing roles so they can pick up some of the work that hitherto our consultants delivered on. And obviously that takes some time as well. So there's quite a lot of detailed work going on around the performance recovery subgroup for cancer that is looking at ensuring that every single service is prioritising cancer patients' slots within their capacity that they have available. So we're going into a level of detail now that we've never been into before, and that gives me the confidence that we will see an improving position, and we can hopefully continue to either really understand our challenges so we can take the right action to improve them, or be able to predict and advise that we can't deliver these services and access capacity elsewhere so that our patients in Highland are not disadvantaged and waiting.
Thanks, Catherine. Any other specific questions that anyone would like to raise now? If not, we'll move on to the finance section, and if I can ask Dave Garden to introduce this, please.
Thanks, David, and good morning, everyone. So the report that's included within the IPR is the month 8 report. So I'm assuming that everybody's read that. And what I was planning on doing is to go through and just update on the month 9 numbers, which have become available since the report was sent out. So the first thing I have to acknowledge, though, is I've just noticed a number formatting error in this report, which is not very good. In terms of the bottom of page 27 in table 1, all of the numbers in that bottom line should be red and in brackets, and the 2 numbers in black. I'm not quite sure how that happened, and my sincere apologies. We'll get that fixed. But clearly we're not in a surplus as at month 8 for £11 million. We're in a deficit at month 8 at £11 million. My apologies for that. So 2 things have happened since the IPR was submitted. One is our month 9 data has arrived, which I'll update as we go through the tables. And the second thing is we've submitted to Scottish Government our final draft submission in terms of our COVID costs for the current year, and we're expecting some announcement within the next week or so around funding for those. So the numbers that are included within the month 8 and month 9 positions assume that we'll be funded for our COVID costs as we have submitted. So the month 8 position shows an £11.2 million year-to-date overspend against budget as at month 8, and month 9 that's increased to £12.3 million. Our forecast outturn remains £8.8 million as per our target set in our annual operating plan. So as it stands right now, we're still expecting to deliver that financial gap based on our approved deficit at the start of the year. The table 2 on page 28, which has got the right colours of numbers and brackets, shows how that is broken down into different component parts. So as at month 8, we would have expected a £5.8 million deficit because we were planning on an £8 million deficit. So we'd expect that to have reached approximately £5.8 million at the end of month 8. On top of that, we've got £5.6 million of savings, which we have not managed to deliver on as a result of slippage in our programme due to the slowing down or pausing of our cost improvement programme. People are aware that has now restarted since summer, but there's still some slippage in terms of savings delivery of £5.6 million. And also there's a net COVID costs which are offset by underspends within operational units. So table 3 in terms of our actual cost improvement delivery for as at month 8 shows that we had a £28.8 million savings target to deliver at the start of the year. Now, Obviously, we paused all of the work on our programme management, our Financial Recovery Board work during March, April, and May, and partially in June, and we started again in July. So there was always anticipation of slippage in terms of our financial recovery. Against the £24.1 million of that target, which was allocated to Financial Recovery Board, we've currently delivered at month 8, £8.3 million, and that's increased in month 9 to a number which won't come up on my screen. If you bear with me 2 seconds. My apologies. I'm working on 2 screens and using Teams at the same time is difficult. So we've achieved year to date at month 9, £10.5 million of savings. So we have a continual improvement, and I think that's really extremely positive in terms of how we've managed to deliver our savings programme in the current year, given the constraints and the difficulties we faced. We're currently expecting or forecasting that we will deliver against the £28.8 million savings target around £20 million, and we've included around £8 million within our COVID delivery. I'll touch on capital. Again, there's been a slight change to capital that's shown in the month 8 report versus the month 9. We've had 2 adjustments to our funding for expected slippage in the Skye and Bannock Hospital bundle, as well as the Rigmore maternity capacity. So approximately £11 million of that money has been taken back by government to provide us next year because of slippage in the expenditure, primarily as a result of COVID. So the actual current plan is now reduced to just slightly under £51 million. Plans are in place, and we're very hopeful, despite the challenges, to deliver that capital position by the end of the year. We've had some very positive meetings, and there's a fairly high degree of confidence around delivery, in spite of the fact that it's very much loaded into the last 3 months of the year. I'll stop there, and I'll hand back to yourself, David, to choreograph.
Thank you. Alex, anything that you want to add from that, from a governance point of view?
No, I think it's remarkable that we're going to get to the 20 million target for savings. It astonishes me how well our staff do, but they seem to come up to the challenge every time, irrespective of what we put in front of them. So the numbers are good. It's just a matter of keeping going and hitting the targets, and keeping our fingers crossed, Dave, that we actually get the support from the Scottish Government that you think we're going to get, both in terms of COVID funding and the savings.
Indeed, Alex, and we should find out that by the end of this week, or hopefully beginning of next week. There's a small matter of the budget this week as well, which may distract them from announcing it.
Thank you, Alex and Dave, for that. Any questions related to the finance section of the report? Anne.
So just to echo Alex's remarks in terms of what an impressive performance it is for the team to have been able to maintain some momentum around the savings targets. It's pretty amazing that Dave has been asked to make a presentation to his colleagues in the finance directors about how we've been doing that, when you consider that we are still escalated as a board. So just, you know, to reiterate, thanks and well done on that point. But I just wondered, I don't know in terms of the detail of what we have managed to maintain momentum on, David, and what we have had to pause in terms of those savings work streams. I wondered if the ones we've had to pause, are those opportunities going to be lost, or will we be able to pick that up next year and add to anything that we were already thinking about for next year?
I'm going to do the classic yes and no kind of answer to this one, I guess, and that those that are appropriate to be carried into next year will be. But I guess we need to be mindful that we have we're remobilising, and things that we may have planned next year may be different because the service may well be different. So I think we're going to have to just pause and reflect on all those ones that were ideas and opportunities in this year, and make sure that they remain ideas and opportunities going into next year, based on the fact that we may have a different system of delivery next year, and we have to look in different areas. Sorry, Anne, that's a typical.
Thanks, Dave. If I can come to Jerry.
Thank you, Dave. Really, just a quick one, and really just to echo the comments that Alex and Anne have made in terms of the tremendous performance on delivery of savings. It was really just to get maybe confirmation from Dave, and I think it ties into Anne's point. Are we looking at a deferral of savings opportunities, which all other things being equal will come through in 21-22, Dave? Or do you think we've lost an opportunity given all that's going on there, or is it a simple deferral?
I think, Jerry, this is what I said to Anne. Some of them will be simple deferrals. I've absolutely no doubt of it. And you know, things like the progress we failed to make, for example, in the labs replacement system services, we know is going to kick into next year, and we'll get the benefit of that next year. I think I'd be reluctant to say that all of those schemes that we'd planned this year would be the same going into next year, because if you think of some of the work streams, for example, one of the work streams is around outpatients. Well, how we deliver outpatients going forward may be entirely different than what we thought about in the beginning of this year. So just to say that's a straight deferral, I think would be too simplistic, really. So you know, there will be a mixture, and we're not entirely sure what all of those will be at this point in time.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move just in the last minute, if it's within the last minute, I think, to the final section around staff governance. There is only one chart that's contained within the report, but Fiona and then Sarah, if you wanted to add any comment to that, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I think obviously we've talked before about the fact we only have a single statistic in here, which is around our overall absence levels, which in October was had fallen to 4.8%. And although we hadn't got the data in time for our last for preparing the report, it stayed pretty much stable at 4.8% again in November. I think there's the bigger thing that we know here is that we've got ongoing both short-term and long-term efforts to try and support the management of absence. And as we go into the new performance year from April, we'll be looking to split down the reporting in a more detailed way, both around different conditions that we want to focus on, and also kind of working on more targeted populations to sort of, I guess, bring some visibility. I think the other thing that we've agreed to do is to have a kind of local target. Obviously the 4% is a national target that has been in place for a very long time, and I think what it would be more meaningful for us to do from April is to be sort of setting ourselves some broken down targets about what we think we can achieve over months in order to get closer to that target, but also so that we're demonstrating progress and action on it. So I think it's an area where we kind of continue to work. I think a question that usually comes up around this is whether or not we're seeing significant COVID absences which aren't reported in this figure as a result of the kind of prevalence increasing. Today, our numbers that are reported through the time recording system are looking pretty low. In the, you know, sort of 30 to 40 absences at any one time, plus around 80 people shielding. We are doing some intensive work on data capture, because I think we recognise that actually we think there is a higher prevalence of COVID leave impacting on key teams, and we just need to make sure we've got clear sight of that so we can provide the necessary support. So that's really all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you, Fiona. And Sarah, as chair of the Staff Governance Committee, is there anything you'd like to
add? Just to talk about the metrics or lack of metrics. So just for those of you who don't know, we took the decision to change the date of our staff governance meeting from January January to February, just to ensure that we could get the right people around the table to have a good, robust discussion around the things that we need to look at. Looking at the metrics going forward, I'm keen to tie those into the board assurance framework and the key areas that we're looking at, but also that links in with the fact that we are in the process of developing metrics around culture, and I think that'll be important to pull that through. But happy to take suggestions from other members of the board. If people wish to email me what you would like to see being pulled through for this report, that would be welcomed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Fiona or Sarah in regard to the staff governance section? If not, let me try to summarise. So firstly, thank you for all the contributors. I recognise that it's a difficult process to cover as much ground. The purpose of bringing this report to the board is both for assurance as well as scrutiny, and I think we've been able to do that in covering both of those areas. The primary assurance, of course, comes through the subcommittees that the board has commissioned to look at these reports. And I'm reflecting on today's conversation, and I'll work with the board secretary. And what I propose is that this report should go out to all board members the moment it becomes available, so that if there are questions that you would like to direct to the subcommittees and the subcommittee chairs, then they can be addressed as they go through that governance process, rather than wait to just doing that at this point in time within the board. But there's the opportunity to do either. So, but again, thank you for your contributions, and any comments related to accuracy or format, please come back to me. We are looking at the timing that we have to make sure the quality of the report is as high as what we would like it. And so your feedback would be very welcome. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Boyd, and sorry for going over time, Boyd.
That's all right, Dave. Thank you very much for conducting that session and marshalling the troops around the various elements of it. We're now about 20 minutes behind schedule, but I think we should still take a 15-minute break and a comfort break and resume at 20 past 11. Are you all able to hear?
Yeah.
And all sitting comfortably again. Move on to the next item on the agenda, item 8, which is the board assurance framework. And we have a paper to which Boyd, the other Boyd, is going to speak.
Thank you, and good morning, colleagues. Boyd Peters, the Medical Director for NHS Highland. This is a paper which provides an update on the progress with embedding risk management across NHS Highland, beginning with a high-level framework. So that's the board assurance framework, which you have as document in the papers today. The journey that we're on is to in the course of this year look into and seek assurance that there are appropriate risk registers in the organisation, and that we have that the system is joined up and in line with what is emerging at the top in the board assurance framework. Further work will be done, and today's paper is submitted for approval by the board so that you can note the progress that's been made, but also note that there will be further work which will be required to review and to redefine some of the risks and escalation processes, not just for the board assurance framework and what comes up to it, but also in the layers of risk registers that exist in the organisation, and how the overall organisational approach to risk is. And so I'll close down at that point. This is a progress report, and there will be more work being done in this area. Thanks.
Okay, I'll invite some questions and comments at the moment. I notice, Boyd, in the page 2 of your introductory SBAR, you refer to the Risk Management Steering Group meeting early in January that felt some of the risks were not strategic in nature, and you're going to reflect on that. You also mentioned that there's a new group being set up, the Strategy Steering Group. Is it that group that will look at that issue that you've identified there?
It will partly look at it, but it's likely that we'll bring the board assurance framework document back to an executive director group, and then probably a board development session to actually work at that. The interest of the risk management steering group is in how we make the approach to risk consistent right through the organisation. We've also noticed that we've used scoring techniques to inform escalation, but what in a department or a unit within the organisation looks like a very high risk to it would not necessarily, you could give a numeric score of 20 out of 25, for instance, that could automatically numerically qualify to go right the way up to the board level, even though from the board overall risk management perspective, that department in that little corner of the organisation is not a high level strategic risk that the board would consider, but it is a risk, but the risk needs to be reflected differently. And so using the numerical escalation method, which we began with, needs to be reviewed, and we probably need to think about it in ways other than the simple calculation of numbers based on judgment of risks, because the perspectives are different depending on where you are. So what the likes of the BAF should do is capture some very high level things. So for instance, we've got some elements in the current paper which show that electrics or other elements of a single facility are not up to modern standards. That probably isn't a strategic risk in some ways. The strategic risk is actually that the board does not have adequate or safe facilities to deliver safe and effective healthcare. And so identifying where the risks should sit and finding a way to capture the high level strategic, and also make sure the right operational risks sit in the right operational parts of NHS Highland are key elements of how we develop a risk system in the organisation. This isn't that these things haven't existed before, but this work is aiming to align, to create a language and culture of risk management, and to make a live and dynamic part of any part of the organisation, with an understanding of how, if you have a risk, it requires mitigation and actions locally rather than escalating always without any of those things being done first. So that's the idea of it. And so in the course of this year, the meetings which have been described here will be part of it, but actually risk is a responsibility of all elements of the organisation. I see some hands going up, so I'll be quiet.
Yeah, there's a raft of hands up for this one. Gaynor to start with.
Thank you, Chair. A really short question. It was just in relation to risk 538 on page 18. I'm wondering if this is correct committee. Just to point out that the Information Assurance Group reports to Clinical Governance Committee, and historically the GDPR risk sat with the Clinical Governance Committee. And I noticed that in these papers today on page 238 at the Audit Committee, this has also been picked up. So it's really just a query whether this risk should sit with Clinical Governance Committee or the committee it currently sits with, and how that has a knock-on effect on where the Information Assurance Group reports to.
Okay, rather than get Boyd to answer each particular point, maybe if you come back, I'll go through a few of the questions that are being asked, and then if you can respond later, Boyd. Go to Fiona and then Alex.
Thanks, Boyd. So it's just really to give a quick update on, because we've got 3 workforce risks, and we have made quite a bit of progress on reviewing these in the last few weeks. So from a culture perspective, we had a dedicated session at last week's Culture Oversight Group to look at our programme level culture risks with the support of the risk manager, and also taking into account the recent internal audit on culture. So what that's allowed us to do is have a much more level of programme risk sort of robustness, which we are now going to then look at the board level risk, just to revisit that and to make sure that to Boyd's point, it is sufficiently strategic and it's aligned to all the work that's happening at the lower level of the organisation. The other couple of points I just wanted to make around the work, we've got 2 workforce risks, one around sort of general workforce availability and one specifically on mental health. And I'm really pleased to say that just this week we've appointed another 2 workforce planning colleagues within the team, and that's going to really help us, along with our recently set up workforce board, to actually have the capacity within the workforce planning team to work with colleagues across the specialist roles and functions that we have to build out those long-term workforce plans. And obviously at the moment we have immediate kind of capacity issues that we obviously have to focus on as well around COVID response and other key areas, but actually what that increase in capacity in our specialist workforce planning team is really going to help us start to revisit what we're doing around workforce and making sure we've got a long-term sustainable plan. We look at the roles that we have and the pipeline that we have. So I just wanted to sort of give a quick assurance and update on that, and you can expect that that framework will be updated in the next few weeks.
And while you're on, Fiona, Jean was asking what are the missing words in section 232 of the SBAR on workforce. Assurance for these risks is also provided by the...
Yeah, and I think that would be the staff governance committee.
Okay, thanks. Alex.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to support what Boyd was saying, we were intending to have a meeting this month, Finance, Resource and Performance Committee, and one of the things we were going to look at was the fact that if you look at the estates risk, there's a lot of estate risks on the board assurance framework, and to be honest, most of them could actually be combined into a higher level risk, which is strategic, rather than specific risk for this building or that building. So that's something that we will do in the future with Boyd and the team's help, and Alan's help as well. Some of the other things we were doing, and Miriam came along to try to support us below that. So what we're looking at is, are there risks that would be moving up to or trending up to come into the numerical way of saying that should now be on the board assurance. And before we could see that, we could say, right, okay, that one isn't strategic. So yes, the number may be there, but as Boyd said, that could be and should be dealt with locally. Whereas some of the other ones is, yes, that needs to come up. So that's more work that our committee are certainly looking to do, and I would suggest it's something that the other committees could look at doing in the same way to help Boyd and the team keep the numbers down that we should be seeing, rather than escalating everything up, which would give us a problem, because then we really won't see the forest for the trees. Thanks.
Boyd, do you want to respond to the points so far?
Yeah, I suppose the BAF is included in the minutes, the papers today, but it's come before and it was approved. But as you read through it again now, with the context given at the start of this section of the meeting by me, it's clear to people that what we've created as the first version of the BAF is not where we want to get to, and as colleagues have already itimised, they're already considering how they review it and look at it differently. The key link person is Louise McInnes, so that we can keep things aligned. She has already drafted up suggestive ways of changing the BAF to bring it in line with the strategic headline, and also we're looking at how the escalation of risk would occur. And I think there's maybe a tendency to think, oh, big risk must escalate, when really what has to happen is that where you identify big risks at any level in the organisation, what you have to do is establish what are the mitigation and what things would need to happen in the future to improve those mitigations, and so that we create a culture of holding risk and managing it, as well as raising awareness where appropriate up the way, rather than passing risks that are challenging up the line, perhaps to a body or a group that doesn't have such direct operational hands-on. And so this is an interim report in a way to describe what's part of a journey that will probably take us at least a year, and I suspect a bit longer, to really embed this throughout the organisation. And so, without getting too much into the detail, I think if colleagues can see and understand that the BAF as it stands is not quite at the strategic level that we would like to see it, and that's where it will go to, and also that these risks are all valid, but they need to be in the right places. And as has been raised by at least one colleague, being clear about what the routes are by which risks report, remembering that some risks might be shared. A computer might be a piece of equipment, but it can also be a very important clinical thing, certain risks and things that happen can affect several different elements of the organization's services, and so sometimes risks are expressed in several places, and different bits of the mitigation and the risk apply to different parts of the organization. So it's a collective habit as well as a focused one.
Okay, thanks, Boyd. And of course, the work on the board assurance framework will happen broadly in parallel to the development of our strategy, as discussed yesterday. Yep. And we should be seen to be very closely linked. We have another three contributors, Margaret, Sarah and Jerry, in that order, and after they've completed, we'll get Boyd to respond.
Hi, thanks, Boyd. There was a couple of things I wanted to raise. I'm not sure if Fiona's answered this, but I was wondering about the columns in the framework that relate to mitigation and reducing risk and progress. I noticed that they're pretty much empty for the workforce sections, and I wonder if that is part of the update that you're referring to, Fiona.
Yes, so that's definitely something that we're planning to revisit in the next couple of weeks as we do the work around that. So the next time we see this, it should be updated.
And the other thing that I wanted to, thank you, the other thing I wanted to ask about was the recruitment strategy. It says that it's progressing. Is there going to be a document coming to us in the near future? Is there some sort of timeline around that?
Yeah, so I'd need to go back and just check the current timeline for that. Obviously, we did the recruitment review that Emma led on at the end of last year, which has been quite helpful. I think now that we've got some additional capacity within the workforce planning team, we should be able to put together a clear timeline for that work and kind of update on that, and that would absolutely form part of those mitigations. So it's definitely something that we want to have a version to take through staff governance in the next, I think in the next couple of months, sort of by the start of the year, even if we then build upon it further.
Okay, thanks very much.
Sarah.
Thanks, Boyd. At the last meeting of the Staff Governance Committee on November the 3rd, the committee agreed they wished to escalate a risk around Statman training up to the board assurance framework. So I'm not sure if that's missing because of an admin error or if it's been omitted in light of what Boyd Peters has been explaining around kind of alignment and what isn't a strategic risk. But I just wanted to flag that up.
Fiona, do you want to respond?
Yeah, and it was just to say, actually, at the meeting that Boyd mentioned in January, I did bring this up. Now, the process of it, we absolutely agree that we do feel that potentially is still a strategic board level risk. But what we've got to do is work with the chief officers on to kind of make sure that we're consistent in terms of how we're recording that risk at an operational level, and then agree what the specific part of the escalation is for that. We are currently working on a plan for statutory and mandatory training that's due to be presented to EDG next week, and then to come to staff governance on the 10th of February. So again, I think that will then allow us as part of that to understand how is that risk referenced both in the operational risk registers, but then actually what do we put in the overarching board level risk.
Okay, thank you. And Jerry, over to Jerry.
Thank you, Chair. More of an observation rather than the question. It was really just to say how much I support the process that Boyd has outlined this morning, and it really is important to identify those strategic risks and the alignment with the work we were looking at yesterday. I think the other element, of course, is to make sure that we separate risks, which is something that may happen, from issues. And there are certain important issues which need to be escalated to the board, and perhaps, and I don't know any of the history of the Statman stuff, and that may well be something, but how we manage risks and how we manage issues are two different things. And it's just, but I heartily support the process that Boyd has outlined this morning. Thank you.
And Alex, before we go back to Boyd.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, just to follow up on Fiona's point about Statman training risks and why it isn't in. Can I suggest that we give some consideration in the future? I'm not talking about this specific issue, but issues like this that come up, is that we put some kind of marker down, even if it's just a blank, you know, everything else is blank. It's just almost a flag that says we've got to deal with this now, because otherwise there is a risk that that falls through a gap and somebody forgets about it, and then we end up in a situation, you know, a month or 2 months down a committee that says, well, I thought that was going to be dealt with, like Sarah just mentioned. And of course, we're all looking at one another going, what's she talking about? So I think it's something that we need to consider in the future. Thanks.
And Boyd, to wrap this section up.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure I have much else to come back. I think colleagues have illustrated through their questions and observations and awareness that the BAF as it stands has, it needs to be dynamic. It needs to improve and be certain things that I've described in strategic terms. We need to be sure that risks aren't being missed. Although with reference to the stat mam one, it's certainly been very clear that lots of things have been happening in terms of how to operationalise it. So that I'm certainly very aware that there are efforts ongoing to mitigate and to approach it afresh to improve the situation. And so, but I'm not sure if it was a version control issue, or, you know, that this version would have been submitted sometime in the last couple of months. So maybe it didn't make it on. In any case, this BAF will be changed, I expect, somewhere in the next 3 to 6 months, depending on COVID, and will be updated, so that we'll be coming back with a different version, and we'll reflect in it all of those risks that should be there, but ideally capturing them as strategically as possible and identifying where below, if there are itemized risks, where below they sit and are managed, so that because lots of things could sit in the board assurance framework, but you need that doesn't help if it's not then clear where somebody's doing something about it, and so that may be one of the areas of improvement that we need to think about. So thanks for the discussion and the support of the paper. Okay, thank you, Boyd. I take it that these are legacy hands that are up. Just to remind you about that. And so that report was for awareness. And just for your awareness, also Annie McLean has put a very nice message in the chat for you to consider. And we move on now to an update on COVID. And I invite Tim Allison to give us a progress report.
Thank you, Boyd, and good morning, everybody. The paper that has been circulated is quite brief and just sets out some underlying details. One of the issues with COVID, as well as it dominating a lot of what we're doing, it's also a relatively fast-moving agenda, and what was true a few weeks ago, whether in terms of disease prevalence or policy or vaccine arrangements, we may find now is totally different. So to give an up-to-date picture, I have a few slides of presentation, and I'm also going to be very happy to take some questions. If I then share my screen, which hopefully people can see now. First of all, just a few comments around the community progress of the virus. During most of the autumn and early winter, we had a fairly consistent picture of maybe around 10 to 20 or so cases a day across NHS Highland. But over the last few weeks, particularly around Christmas and New Year, there was a very large upsurge in the number of cases. Fortunately, numbers have somewhat declined now, although the decline is fairly slow. The reasons for the large number of cases are to some extent unable to be absolutely defined, but we have a good idea from talking to cases, talking to people who have had the diagnosis and finding out where they've been, what they've been doing, and also looking at the profile of the disease. And it would seem to be something of a combination of social contact prior to Christmas, and also emergence of the new variant of the virus, particularly in the area around the Inner Murray Firth. This is demonstrated in the maps showing the weekly numbers of COVID positive cases. Earlier on in the pandemic, parts of Argyll and Bute, particularly those closest to Glasgow, tended to have the highest numbers of cases, but just recently it has been around the Murray Firth, particularly in Easter Ross, and most notably and sadly, we've had outbreaks within care homes, 2 in Invergordon, 1 in Dingwall, and 1 in Inverness. And given the vulnerability of people within the care homes, that has caused a lot of challenges. There is progress to report, though, in terms of how we are dealing with COVID and tackling COVID. Across NHS Highland as a whole, we faced quite a lot of challenges with availability of testing, but through some developments over the last couple of months, the UK Postal Testing Service has been expanded and linked in with some of our work to mean that now there is access to the UK Postal Service across the whole of the mainland and also in Skye. Because of the remote and rural nature of some parts of the area, testing is it can still take a little bit of time to get tests through, but the availability is there. We also have new fixed sites and arrangements for tests to be available from fire stations, and we're looking potentially at expanding that. There is also testing for people who don't have symptoms. This has been going on for quite a long time within care homes, and is being extended there, but is also now available for staff and has been expanded for hospital admissions. Vaccination is clearly top of our agenda, is a vital tool, not the only tool, but certainly a vital tool in the way that we need to tackle the virus. Both vaccines are available now, and the AstraZeneca and Pfizer, and it's likely that further vaccines will be available in the next few months. Overall, our performance in vaccination has certainly been encouraging. It's varied somewhat across NHS Highland area, with some areas being able to complete sections of the vaccination quicker than others. The latest figures that I've had from this morning are that GPs, who are the focus for vaccinating the community, have now vaccinated 13,797 people, and our overall number of people across the whole of NHS Highland vaccinated will be quite soon it'll be up to 30,000. There was a comment earlier regarding availability of vaccine, and we think with the flexibility that we have within the programme, we have the ability to cope with some changes in availability of vaccine. But also when we're looking at Pfizer versus AstraZeneca, with the AstraZeneca vaccine being manufactured in the UK, its supply should be reasonably stable, and it's the AstraZeneca vaccine that we are predominantly using in the community to vaccinate people at risk there, starting with over 80s and then moving to younger age groups. The care home programme has been finished except for 3 of the care homes which have had outbreaks, and we were returning those to complete the vaccination. And I'm pleased to say that our uptake within care homes has been excellent, with 90% of residents vaccinated and 81% of staff. And once we've completed the other 3 care homes, that will increase slightly. So we've been able, at least in first dose, to offer very good coverage to care homes. We have had to delay our original plans because of advice from government and the chief medical officers of the UK, and extend the gap between first and second doses from 3 to 4 weeks up to 11 or 12 weeks, and that means we'll fairly soon be starting the second dose of vaccine. We have a programme set out for going through vaccination, and we are confident about being able to meet the targets set out on the right-hand side of the table. So we will be moving in a couple of weeks. In fact, some of that has already started within primary care to people below the age of 80 and extremely vulnerable individuals. And as the year goes on, then further people will get vaccinated, but there are certainly challenges within primary care, especially as we get to the time when people will be receiving second doses, or some people will be receiving second doses, as well as other people receiving first doses. So we need to work with colleagues across the system to work out the arrangements to deliver that effectively and have contingencies in place. And I think that summarises where we are with the with COVID in the community and vaccinations, and I'm quite happy to take questions.
Thank you. And Philip, you intimated that you had something you wanted to ask.
Sorry, boys, you broke up there. Were you asking me or Graham?
You're on mute, Boyd.
Yeah, it's coming and going. I was asking Philip, who had submitted some questions in advance. Can you hear us, Philip?
It's coming and going. The sound's dropping quite considerably at the moment, but I had submitted some questions which I circulated to Tim. I think he's touched on a number of those questions, but mainly it was in relation to the difference between the approved 3-week period between the first and second dosage, and if that has any implications, if we can look at the supply issue that's currently arising as well, and is there anything we need to do in terms of planning for any mitigation should that not work out?
Okay, thanks, Philip. Maybe come back to Tim in a wee while after we've had other points and questions. Alex.
Yeah, thanks, Boyd. Tim, a couple on testing. You mentioned the fact that we're setting up testing and postal testing, etc. It's fine. Are we, or do we still have, and are we using our own capability within NHS Highland laboratories, or is everything going to the Lighthouse labs and other UK labs? And then the other question is more for the future. Once this vaccination programme really gets going, I'm assuming that the scientists will need data to make sure that we've got A, the efficacy we think we're going to get, and B, a handle on the transmissibility of the disease post-vaccine. Is that something that we're going to be involved in as a board? Is that something that you're already planning for? And if so, do we have the resource to cope with that? Thanks.
Okay. Tim, do you want to come back on these two?
Yeah,
points?
thank you. In terms of the two doses, the advice from the chief medical officers is based on what the Joint Committee for Vaccination and Immunisation has recommended. There isn't absolute unanimity across the world regarding the gap between vaccines, and I think that is largely because of the new nature of the vaccines and the limited time that there has been to be able to study them. Indeed, some vaccines only need one dose rather than two. A lot of the research has been based on the two doses with 3 to 4 weeks apart, but there is good evidence around both the effectiveness of one dose and the ability for the delayed second dose to be as effective as a second dose in 3 to 4 weeks, or potentially more effective. So I think, as with many things, we can't be certain because everything is so changing and so new, but I don't have significant concerns, and it has enabled the vaccination to be spread out to a large number of people more quickly. In terms of testing and laboratory capacity, absolutely, we do make use of the NHS Highland laboratory capacity, most of which is in the Raigmore laboratory. But the testing, it works different ways with different laboratories for different purposes, and the Raigmore laboratory is close to capacity for COVID testing, at least at certain times at the moment, and will test, for example, people who are in Raigmore, or also if we need additional capacity in case of outbreaks, it can be useful. The Postal Service feeds in as part of the UK testing system to the Lighthouse laboratory, but tests move around a bit depending on capacity. So, as an example, care home testing for the more sensitive PCR testing has been going to the Lighthouse laboratory, but that's in the process of changing to go to a regional laboratory which is hosted by NHS Grampian. So things move about, but we do aim to use our own capacity. And in terms of data, we do take part in some studies. There is research going on that we're not directly involved with around transmissibility. That may take time to come back, but I think a lot of the evidence for transmissibility will come from population studies over the next few months, based sort of observationally on levels of vaccination and levels of infection. So I think because it can take a very long time for formal academic studies to report, although the vaccine studies have so far come out very quickly, looking at community transmission could take a long time. So I think it's probably the evidence will be based more on observation of what happens.
Thank you, Tim. Good to take Graham, Hardy and Alistair and Anne, take all three of them and then ask Tim to respond to points raised, starting with Graham.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Tim. It's just interesting, Tim, on the Helensburgh Medical Centre Facebook page this morning, they said that today we have been made aware of patients receiving emails about their COVID vaccination from an NHS Hotmail account. The email asks for personal information, and obviously they state this is a scam. I don't know if there's a new thing or something you've been aware of. I mean, obviously, if you're dealing with elderly people being vaccinated, you don't want people becoming victim of scams and stuff. So just
okay.
Yeah, just to come back on that straight away. Our system in NHS Highland at the moment for the population relies on general practice, and general practice inviting people for their vaccination. It wouldn't ask for personal information either. There is a national system of invitations, but for the current cohorts we're not using that. So by the sound of it, this is not an official channel.
No. Okay, thanks, John.
Okay, Alistair.
Yes, thanks, Boyd. I can probably answer Graham's question as well. From the citizens' advice perspective, we've been aware for since almost a year now, the scams associated with the pandemic, false test kits, even false vaccines, and also now this one, which I know people in Inverness have received, where it's basically harvesting personal information to carry out identity frauds or other aspects on it. So it is prevalent. My question to Tim is, you talked about take-up rates of residents and take-up rates of care home staff in your presentation. How would you categorise the risk if staff are not taking up the vaccination to residents of care home, and vice versa, where residents are not taking up the vaccination to risks to other residents in care homes? Thank you.
Okay, and Anne.
Okay, so I just wanted to make a comment that really comes on the back of those issues about the scams. The pandemic brings out the best and the worst in this sort of situation. The scams are the worst, but the best is the type of collaboration that is going into this vaccination programme. And I think it's easy to forget just seeing the straight table of what we hope to achieve, just the range of people and effort that is behind all of that, whether it's our GP colleagues in the community, whether it's Fiona's HR team facilitating staff moving around or doing vaccination instead of their usual duties, and whether it's the staff themselves who are willing to to undertake vaccinations, or indeed to make their appointments and turn up for vaccinations. So it is important, I think, to emphasise how much of a team effort is behind all this programme. But my question really was for Pam. I think in terms of whether, I know it's the early days, but have we had any feedback from Scottish Government about how they view our programme and our progress? And are there any specific areas where you think we represent a key risk, and how are we mitigating that? Thank you.
Okay, we'll come to Pam in a moment. Get Tim to respond to Alice's point, and then come to Pam to round off this section.
Thank you. We certainly would encourage everybody to take the vaccine up, and we've seen excellent uptake of vaccine across the board, and very little evidence of people making false allegations or stories up about the vaccine. It is not compulsory, and I think that we need to recognise principally, picking up the mentioned earlier around stopping spread, but the evidence is principally around the protection the vaccine offers to individuals. So the risk of not taking up a vaccine is principally to the person themselves who doesn't take that vaccine up. There is likely also to be an effect with reducing community spread, but that's not the prime reason that we vaccinate, and we still don't know the extent, assuming that it's true, the extent of the protection. So we would simply continue to encourage everybody to take the vaccine up, and we're getting in some of the over 80s up to almost 100% take up in the community. So we'd encourage that to continue, but we would want to caveat it a little bit that at the moment everybody who is vaccinated still needs to follow on with all the other precautions, and with whether social distancing, not meeting other people outside the arrangements within level 4, etc. I think people may feel that the vaccine offers them free rein to do what they like, and sadly that's not true. And we need to remind people of that. But hopefully later on in the year, when there's enough vaccine coverage throughout the population, things may change.
That's an important message to finish on, Tim. And over now to Pam.
Thank you. So I suppose starting off with the kind of feedback, as Anne asked about from the centre and knowing how we're doing nationally, I think I can get some feedback. Sorry, don't know if everybody's got their mics off. Okay, I'll carry on. It's a bit odd. So in terms of care homes, when we discussed the care home performance, so we completed all of our care homes that we could by around the 20th of January. The target date was 6th of February, so we were well ahead. And as many of you will know, Argyll and Bute were before Christmas, and most of North and West Highland was done around that time, and our critical mass of care homes in South and Mid took us a bit longer, but we were still well ahead of what was expected, and that really only leaves those that are affected by the outbreaks, and obviously we have a different way to manage those. So my understanding that that's a fairly impressive performance, and in national terms that we are looking good there, and that's against 91% of our residents, care home residents, being vaccinated, and I think it's 80%, Tim will keep me right now, of staff. I might have got that with the wrong way around. Tim can correct at the end. So care homes we have absolutely done well on, and I can see, Tim, do you want to just correct my figures in case I got them wrong? So 91%.
You're right, Pam. Yeah, you're right, absolutely right.
I've got this tendency to get them the wrong way around. So from a care home perspective, it appears that we have made really good progress, and of course the importance of that is if the coronavirus does come in on the scene, that hopefully the acuity and the level of illness that people experience will not be severe in the way that we've known it, and it will prevent death, and that's the hope and the aim. In terms of our staff group, we're between 60 and 70% of our frontline staff have been vaccinated. In fact, in terms of where we're at now, we're reviewing, if we're now starting to potentially take a step into the territory that wouldn't be prioritised, and I'll say a bit about that in a minute. So, where's that cut-off point where you have absolutely captured all the staff who are working frontline with people and at risk? So we're now doing a bit of a review to mop that up and make sure that that is as an absolute. And then with our over 80s, so we've had a bit of a challenge, as you know, because the national system that picks up our data hadn't been processing the GP data, and of course our biggest arm for over 80s of delivery is through our GPs. So in the last couple of days we've been doing manual counts to get an indicator of where we are, and yesterday all boards got a count from the centre of what was coming through the GP systems, and I'm pleased to say that what we were manually counting and what was coming in through the what we were given from government actually looks about right. And obviously we're doing some data quality checking there. But Tim did say we had 13,797 as of today over 80s that have been vaccinated, and that's against a target to be completed by the 6th of February as well of 18,427. And that's a percentage of 74%. And I know that nationally that's pretty impressive too. I'm not at liberty to be sharing other boards' data. I know they're all looking at their data quality and making sure that what their percentages are, but we're nearly there, and we're confident that we'll meet that target. So in the wave one, I think it goes back to what others have said. Our teams have worked and been challenged. Honestly, we are relentless with people, which must be really annoying at times. In terms of what we're trying to achieve, but the teams are very motivated by this. I think the other bit that is a risk then, if we come on to the risks, it's where we do or don't have discretion. And so at the beginning, I think in terms of our enthusiasm, in terms of our pragmatism, we sometimes we did make a few decisions that would have taken us out with the priority groups, and we've corrected that, and that is not happening now. Those were well intended, well motivated, in some ways reasonably rational thinking as to why you would do that, and pragmatic given we're remote and rural. So you know, there's something about the kind of pragmatism that can prevail there. However, we're very clear now, as everybody is, that the priority groups are the priority groups, and they are for a reason the priority groups, and that's because the level of vaccination at different age groups produces different outcomes in relation to the potential for death. And we know that the very elderly, it's a very small number to prevent a death. And the younger you get, even as young as me, doesn't have anything like the same impact. So, you know, if you think about that in the round, because you know, there are people who think, well, why am I not getting done now? Why am I not getting done now? Or why did they get done? And we, you know, have to try and manage that risk all the time. Where we're at right now, vaccine supply is coming. It's still a finite resource, and it's still going to be managed over a period of time. So we must make sure that those most vulnerable, in line with the strategy, get their vaccinations, because actually that mitigates the outcome of death significantly, working from the very old, or the older, very, very much older, better not use a word like that, very much older, down to youngsters like myself. So I hope that that's kind of helpful. So we have to mitigate those risks, that we don't stray, except when perhaps we have if we have a few doses left over, and pragmatically, rather than waste a dose, you would pull on who you can. You would still then try and do that in a prioritised way where you can. So that's absolutely the approach we're trying to take.
Okay, sorry, my connection dropped for a moment there, Pam, but back on now. Is Alex, did you want to come back in?
Yeah, very, very, very quickly, and it's for Tim to comment on this. There was a report this morning that came out of Germany on AstraZeneca, efficacy being only 8% for the over 65s. Now, hopefully, that's misinformation, but it was supposedly from 2 German ministers. Have you heard anything about this, Tim? I would have thought the data doesn't support that, but I'll leave that to you.
Tim.
Thanks. I haven't heard that. I would be a little bit sceptical, or very sceptical, about that. That there's a I think there's quite a lot of politics going on at the moment over the last few days, certainly around the supply of vaccine within the EU. I would take that with a huge pinch of salt, there is good evidence of the effectiveness of AstraZeneca from at a good variety of age groups, and that's the way it's been allowed to come in for use, and why approval's been given, and it's been given on the basis of the evidence from clinical trials. So I mean, I haven't seen the report, but I would not put significant weight on that at the moment, at least.
Okay, we'll draw this item to a conclusion just now. Obviously, it's of great significance to us at this moment. I would like to thank Tim on behalf of the board and his team for all they're doing. It's been an exceedingly busy time for them, particularly since the surge in cases post-Christmas, when we've had a much increased level of activity in North Highland to what existed beforehand. So, Tim, would you convey our thanks to all of your team for all they're doing on our behalf and on behalf of the people of the Highlands?
Yes, well, thanks. I would wish to point out, though, that the efforts go very widely across the whole of the health board and partners, whether in primary care, secondary care, social care, local authorities, also communities, and the way that individuals are supporting what happens there. So yes, I certainly will do that with my team, but I wouldn't want to make people think that there isn't a massive contribution from across the communities. Indeed,
yeah. We move on now to a culture programme update from another of the people who's been kept busy during the pandemic, Fiona.
Thanks, Chair. So yeah, there's obviously quite a lot of detail in the paper, but what I thought it would be helpful to do is just cover off some key areas with a bit of a kind of update and positioning, and then look forward to our usual good session of questions and challenge, which is always welcomed. And I think New Year is a good time for us to sort of reflect on where we are with lots of things, including culture. What have we done, and what have we still got to do? And I think it was really inspiring at the start of the meeting to hear from some of our colleagues who joined us, who are clearly role modelling all we want to see in our culture, both at an individual and at a leadership level. And actually, we've got loads of people like this in the organisation. And actually, it's really important we don't always focus on the negatives and the examples of where things go wrong. It's really important we remember to keep celebrating success and keep promoting the people who've got these excellent behaviours and really care and are passionate about our culture and our people. And we've been reflecting on the fact, I think, that culture change does take time, and it's not something that senior management or a programme alone can deliver on. We do play a pivotal role in putting the plans and the resources in place, in role modelling the culture in what we do, again, as individuals and as leaders, and in how we, kind of run this organisation every day. But I think what we need to probably put slightly more front and centre as we move into the new year is the fact that it takes each and every colleague in NHS Highland to both create and to change our culture, because culture is what we experience on a day-to-day basis when we're at work. And over the last 18 months since I've been in role, obviously we've had a lot of attention, quite rightly, on addressing the issues of the past, of supporting people with healing and ensuring we've got channels to both support people and to report concerns. We've done training in things like courageous conversations, and we've externally reviewed our people processes. But we are moving into a bit of a different phase now, and it's all about creating the conditions across the organisation to make sure that every single colleague is treated with kindness and respect and compassion. But that's not a one-way process, because every individual in this organisation also needs to extend that kindness, compassion and respect to everyone they work with and everyone they come into contact with, whatever that relationship may be, as we go about our day-to-day work. And this is really at the heart of the work streams that we've put in place and that are set out in the paper. Our values and behaviours, civility saves lives, all about reaching out into the organisation to explain what the standards that we need are, to put in place tools to support this, and putting in place peer support for both colleagues and managers. And we are working actively with our new head of communications and engagement to make sure that we are actively engaging and interacting with colleagues and building awareness and understanding of what our own individual roles and responsibilities are in culture, as well as the support that we can provide and the things that we're promoting across the organisation. So in terms of the culture programme itself, activity has continued, as you'll see, and one of the really important things for us has been to maintain progress throughout the COVID response. But we are very mindful of the pressures that we put on colleagues, and so we will continue to tailor and adapt our plans. It's not about stopping things or pausing things when it comes to culture, but it's just about being thoughtful about what we prioritise, how we resource it, and how we engage colleagues in a way that works for them. And I think we need to balance the resources we've got available to work on the aspects of design and delivery, but also the capacity of the wider organisation to engage and to take on the things that we're doing. But where necessary, we will take on additional capacity to help support the priorities, and that's something that we have been looking at as we now get to a stage of the programme where we've got robust plans and deliverables that we've set out with the work streams. We're continuing to work on organisational learning, and we're developing a detailed report and plan which is bringing together all of the insights that we've already gathered and that we're working on. We've had the first themes of learning start to come through from the healing process. We've completed a root cause analysis with the whistleblowers, and we're in the process of doing a similar exercise with colleagues in Argyll and Bute. But we've got lots of insights from staff experience surveys, from the Sturrock report, from Galanders, from the Argyll and Bute survey last year, and we've got culture audit feedback as well as other things. So what is really important that we do is consolidate all of that learning, all of those recommendations, and bring that into a single place and a single report where we look at what have we done to address this, what are the gaps, and how do we need to tailor what we're doing going forward. So that report is well underway, and we'd be planning to bring a detailed update on that for discussion at a future board meeting. And I think where that's taking us to is that we had what we thought was going to be quite a short-term diagnostic and root cause analysis work stream as part of the culture programme, and I think that is morphing into our organisational learning as a whole, and so that's something that we'll make sure that we're continuing to take forward, because it's all about us continuing to listen and to learn and take action off the back of that. We talked a little bit in the section on the performance report about the fact that measuring progress on culture particularly is challenging. And we've got insights that we can take from some of the measurements we have, like I Matter and Everyone Matters, like some of the workforce statistics. But we know we've got to be much more specific and able to reach right into the organisation to understand the temperature of our organisation, but also at an individual team level as well, so that managers can have some control over the things they put in place, because not everyone will have the same issues and challenges. It's a really exciting piece of work, and the work stream on this has been kicked off, and we're prepared to invest where we need in getting the right tools and systems, but this is one piece where it needs quite a lot of design and research to be put into place to make sure that whatever it is that we do put in place is going to be effective, and it's going to tell us what we need to know. And I think the other thing this work stream will also start to think about is we've talked about having a whole organisation progress survey at some point, probably in late spring, around culture. And again, the work stream here will help us understand what the options for that might be and how we might want to go about it. So moving on from the culture programme, I just wanted to talk a little bit about where we're up to with the healing process. And obviously we've included quite a detailed update around the numbers engaging with the process and how things are going. And today I think it's really important to reflect that all of the recommendations from the independent review panel of the healing process, which have been to the remuneration committee, have been accepted in full, and that's a real sign of the diligence of that panel and the effort that went in, I guess, ahead of time, and also as that panel has started to hear cases, about really making sure we take the time to understand the guidance and the remit, ask the questions. And we're now really into quite a good operating rhythm with the panel having their recommendations and coming into the remuneration committee and the outcomes being progressed. We've also had really good feedback from a number of participants who found the process really helpful. And that's a whole range of things that the process does. It's about being heard by the panel, about one-to-one support from CMP. It's about the access people have had to psychological therapies, and also the personal apologies that have been received from the Chief Executive. We know that for a small number of people, the process hasn't delivered what they had hoped for, and we're sorry that people feel like that. But I suppose that's something that we've got to accept will always be the case in any process. But what we're really keen to make sure is that people who haven't yet taken up the process do feel encouraged to do that and to come forward. The process is open for registration until the end of February, although the healing process panels will continue to hear the cases they have sort of through into the late summer. But we really would encourage people, if they've not been quite sure, get in touch, register. CMP will have a discussion with you, and you can sort of think about whether or not the options available under that would be kind of helpful for you. And we continue to meet with those that were involved in the design and co-production. So there's always little things that we're fine-tuning as we go through to make sure the process is working, that the guidance is really clear. We've also been dealing with a number of concerns around the financial payments element of the process. So I just want to talk about that in a little bit more depth, just to be, I guess, clear about what's happened and where we are. Firstly, I'd like to say I'm very sorry that we didn't pick this up as a potential issue sooner than we did. We know it's caused a significant amount of concern and confusion, and that was never our intention. This process is about healing, and there's been a lot of effort and time to try and make the experience as smooth as possible. And so we're very sorry if anyone's been distressed as a result of this. With the benefit of hindsight, the practical elements of the process, like the processing of financial payments, should have had specific discussion and attention through co-production to ensure that everyone had the same understanding and awareness, and any questions or concerns were addressed before we launched the process. But I think it is also important to understand that there is currently no dispensation to allow us to make payments other than through the payroll, subject to tax and national insurance. This isn't a matter that NHS Highland make a decision on. That's the current status based on the specific and unique nature of the scheme and the detailed advice we received. It's not like any other scheme or process, and that's what defines the treatment of any payments that we make. Through the co-production, the process and the guidance did always note that payments would be subject to applicable tax and national insurance, and that was agreed and signed off in co-production. But as we've reflected, in not having explicit discussions on this, everyone had a slightly different assumption of what that may or may not mean and what would apply. One of the challenges with the nature of the healing process is that the tax treatment depends on the reason for the payment and the specific kind of nature. And actually our confidentiality and the information that we receive mean that could have a whole different range of treatments applied to it, and we're paying payments to current or to former employees. And obviously this is an anonymous process right through to the point where remuneration committee are making approvals. So that in itself again adds a level of complexity. We have now written to HMRC in December, and because we're now we've got recommendations from the panel about specific different cases, we've been able to provide the level of detail to HMRC along with some anonymised examples of recommendations, the rules of the scheme, which we have asked them to then give us a view on whether or not there are any dispensations that can be granted to treat payments differently, and to get some specific advice now that we have recommendations that they can consider. We have written to them again at the end of last week just to ask for an update on timescales. It is a quite complex case, and obviously it will take some time for that to come back, but we are actively progressing that. I think it's important to say we don't know what the outcome of that will be. There is no guarantee that there will be any change in treatment possible, but that's what we're effectively asking for consideration of and clarity on. Processing payments via payroll and deducting tax and national insurance is quite a significant amount of work, and it does incur additional employer costs, particularly with national insurance. So clearly a dispensation that allowed to treat payments differently would be very much welcomed. But this isn't a matter on which we have discretion, and we don't currently have the authority to treat payments in this way. There have been reports that to suggest we do have a choice, but that's not correct based on the very specific nature of the scheme and the payments. We are working closely with our colleagues in the co-production group, and as soon as we get feedback from HMRC, we will reconvene that group, work through the feedback that we've got and agree the communication plan around that and what action needs to be taken. So just wanted to kind of clarify that. The final point I just wanted to draw out from the report before opening up to further comment and question is just around the whistleblowing standards. Now, these national standards are due to be implemented from the 1st of April. We have put an oversight group in place, and we've got a couple of meetings in the diary over the next couple of weeks to create our detailed action plan around what we need to do to implement the standards. From a timing perspective, obviously it is a bit challenging because we need to make sure we engage right across the organisation and out into external partners as well. But obviously there are a lot of pressures in the system at the moment, so we need to try and make sure that we do this in the most efficient way and we prioritise the actions that we're taking. One of the ways that we're quite fortunate is that we have already put in place the Guardian service as our independent speak up channel. So we've already got a really robust additional mechanism in place for people to be able to escalate the kind of concerns that the whistleblowing standards cover. And so alongside our non-executive champion Bert, the Guardian service is a key part of our implementation group and our approach going forward. And we're continuing to work closely with the Office of the Independent National Whistleblower. And there were a couple of sessions over the last week or so with Bert and the chair attending, and myself and some other people are critical friends of the INWO, which gives us early input and a route for feedback on things that are coming out. So it is a challenging timescale, particularly given the prevalence of COVID that colleagues are dealing with across the system at the moment. But I think our plan is going to be focused on identifying what's the best way we can go about implementing these, what are the key priorities, and to some extent how do we manage to do that within the capacity we've got available. So I'd like to hand back to Chair now.
Thank you, Fiona, for that very comprehensive overview of the culture activity. And there is a welter of activity ongoing in the cultural domain. And it's complex, particularly in regard to aspects around the healing process and the finances thereof. Can I invite colleagues to come in with any comments or questions that they may have? And Jean, you identified one particular question. Don't know if you want to come in with that question just now.
Yes, thank you, Boyd. And thank you, Fiona, so much for your overview just now, comprehensive, as Boyd said. And thanks for the high level of detail and thoroughness of your report, which has given me a high level of assurance through the culture programme and the healing process. My question's a quick one. In Appendix 1, I'm interested to know, are the planned calling it out with compassion workshops based on the Civility Saves Lives model